All right. Hi, everybody, and good day to you. We're going through chapter 33 of Numbers. It says it's the journeys. It's the journeys that we've been on since we left Egypt. It says these are the journeys of Israel's seed. Remember, we're always talking about Israel's seed. Not the children of Israel, not the sons of Israel. These are multi-generations of spiritually born men. And I think it's very significant that it's after we do Passover that we end up numbering our men. Because that's when a man who left the kingdom of his birth and joined himself to Israel as a ger, and then at Passover, circumcised himself, all the men of his household, and became the Ezra men. That is the spiritually born men. When we talk about the promise that Yehovah made about seed and land to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, this is what we're talking about. Today, we're going into the land, or we're on the cusp of going into the land. These are the journeys of Israel's seed who went out of the land of Egypt by their armies under the hand of Moses and Aaron. Here it is, Exodus 12. This is the start of our journey. 12:37, it says, and Israel's seed journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot, about 600,000 men on foot, besides children. Well, there was a mixed multitude with them also. I believe they were the new ger. Many of them may have likely have been Egyptians who realized the Elohim of Israel is a very powerful Elohim. I think I'm going to go with them. Also, there may have been some of Jacob's seed. I notice I did not say Israel's seed. I said Jacob's seed, who lost a son, a firstborn, and realized, perhaps repented, and decided to follow Yehovah after Passover. But they weren't counted among Israel's seed, 600,000 men. Gibor, it says men, it's translated as men, it's Gebarim, 600,000 Gebarim. These are Ezra men, strong men. That's why they're men of war. After Passover. Now Moses wrote down the starting point of their journeys at the command of Yehovah. And these are the journeys according to their starting points. And this is where we're beginning right here in Ramses. It says they departed Ramses in the first month on the 15th day of the first month. On the day after Passover, Israel's seed went out with boldness in the sight of the Egyptians. You know, that is saying something significant. Up until Passover, what was it Moses was telling Pharaoh? Let my son, my firstborn go. No, firstborn Israel go, that they may serve me. Firstborn, you must be born again. We didn't get to go until we were Yehovah's firstborn. That happens at Passover. And it's no accident that, you know, we have, I put the 430 days. We left 430 days, 430 years to the day. If you ask most people, they'd say, well, how long were you in Egypt? How long were we in Egypt? And they will tell you 430 years. Some will say 400 years, depending on where they remembering it from. But we were, in fact, only in Egypt for 210 years. And I can prove it. I can show you where the 430 years is in Yehovah's words. Now, I have to use Yasher to fill in some of the gaps, but it all makes absolutely perfect sense. We left 430 years to the day. What does that tell us? What's happening 430 years before, perhaps? Do you think it might have been related to Passover? Now, it wasn't until where was it? It was at the time, Genesis 18, 17, where we were talking about the time of life. And the time of life is when Isaac, no, I take it back. It was a time of life that, no, it would have to be Isaac, that Isaac was born on. And Isaac was born. I'd love to go through this, but I think we've gone through it in the past. But I'm going to just take you through this little by little. I'll stop it and start it. But I want you to read through this, and you'll see where this is all coming from. Passover is called the time of life because it's the time where a man is born a second time. Let me take it down to the bottom of this. It's we got to understand that Abraham was in Egypt from the time Yehovah became essentially his Elohim, made a promise to him. This is it. This is the beginning of this journey in Yasher. Here, look what it says. This is Yehovah's promise to Abram, when he was 70. And it was in the 15th year of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, which is the 70th year of the life of Abraham. 70 years. This is where the 430 years begins. And Yehovah appeared to Abram in that year and said to him, I am Yehovah, who brought thee out of the land of Ur-Kasdim, to give thee this land for an inheritance. Now therefore walk before me and be perfect and keep my commands. For to thee and to thy seed, there it is, to thee and thy seed, I will give this land, the land and the seed. Today we're going to fulfill the promise. And I will give the land for an inheritance from the river Mitzrayim unto the great river Euphrates. We didn't really get all that land. We're going to talk about next week, I believe. We're going to talk about the borders of the land. And we're going to see it doesn't go all the way up to the river Euphrates. The river of Egypt, it goes to the river of Egypt. But it doesn't go quite up to Euphrates. Anyway, I think you'll find that interesting. Let's go with 4. Oh, Ramses. We were going to talk about Ramses. Let me pull up a map. I find maps are always handy. Here's Ramses. Let me show you. Here's Egypt. There's a big picture of Egypt there. Here's Ramses. We're going to go from there to Sukkot. I got to zoom in to get to Sukkot. There's Sukkot right here. And then rather than taking this route, the way to Shur, which would have led to Ber Lakoi Rai and led us eventually to the promised land, we took a detour, and instead we dropped down to this part and we went to Etham. From Etham, you're going to see we're going to drop down to the Red Sea where we crossed. Let me read it to you. For the Egyptians were bearing all their firstborn, their Bekor. These are men. You know, there wasn't any firstborn ladies that died in Egypt from Israel's seed, from Jacob's seed, or from Egypt's seed. For the Egyptians were bearing their Bekor, whom Yehovah had killed among them. It says also their Elohims. Yehovah also on their Elohims. Yehovah executed judgments. You know, we're not talking about some of the gods that they worshipped. We're talking about their lawmakers and judges. Even Pharaoh's son died at Passover. So keep in mind when we talk about their Elohim, we got to understand what an Elohim is. He's a lawmaker and judge. Yehovah is the lawmaker and judge. Even Paul says, there are many Elohim. Yeah, we've got Elohim. You know, even Israel has Elohim in their gates. Those are the men of the cities. So we have to understand when we're talking about lawmakers and judges that they are Elohim. So here we are. Then Israel's seed moved from Ramses and camped in Sukkot. They departed Sukkot and camped in Etham. Okay, took you all the way down to Etham and then Pi-hakerot. They moved from Etham and turned back to Pi-hakerot, which is east of Baal Zephon, and they camped at Migdal. Let's look at where that is. Here is Pi-hakerot. Here's Migdal. Baal Zephon, I don't know where that is. But when Pharaoh saw that we turned south here, instead of continuing towards Canaan, the general direction of Canaan, yeah, we could have taken a more direct route. But when he saw us that we turned south here, he said that we were tied up in the land and he figured we were vulnerable. So that's when he turned and decided to come after us. Let me go back. Migdal. They departed from before Hakerot and passed through the Red Sea, passed through the midst of the Red Sea. In the wilderness, went 3 days' journey in the wilderness of Etham, and camped at Marah. Now, where are they getting Etham? We have to ask these questions. We've learned so many bad things. We were just in Etham. Now we're going back to Etham. It doesn't make any sense. And camped at Marah. Remember, Marah was where the bitter waters were. And Moses was instructed by Yehovah to take a branch, threw it in the waters, and it made the water sweet. The people were able to drink. Then we moved. Next verse, it says that they moved from Marah and came to Elim. At Elim were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. So they camped there. It was at Elim that Yehovah gave us his Sabbath. And it was at Elim that the manna began to fall each morning. Sunday through Friday. They moved from Elim and camped by the Red Sea. Seems like they're almost all by the Red Sea. Maybe they were inland more. I mean, you have to ask yourselves, here we are. They crossed over. We're heading south. Did we cut through? It seems like we're along the seashore pretty much the whole time. Here's Mount Sinai. Rephidim is going to be right in this area. And the wilderness of Sinai, where we camped for over a year, is down here. Can you guys see my hand? I'm hoping that you can see that hand, or at least pointer. It's a hand for me. But here's what I wanted to point out. Traditionally, Jabal el-Lawz was not the real site of where Yehovah gave his 10 commandments. Mount Sinai. They call this the Sinai Peninsula, and they made Sinai somewhere in here. But look, they've got Rephidim, they've got Dafka, they've got Elim, they've got Mara, all here, because they had us cutting through the Red Sea and going through this portion right here. It's completely wrong. We had this. I mean, when I was a boy, this is what everybody thought. But it wasn't until people began to see that where Mount Sinai actually was, and all of the archaeology about this site, where Mount Horeb was, the rock that Moses hit with the rod of Elohim, and water came out. So right now we're somewhere, I think, along here, along the Red Sea. We camped by the Red Sea is what it said. Where are we? Here we are. Red Sea. Oh, I can make this bigger. That'll make it easier for you. All right. They moved from Elim and camped by the Red Sea. They moved from the Red Sea and camped in the wilderness of Sin. Again, where is the wilderness of Sin? It doesn't make sense. Let me show you. We're going to see this in other places. Wilderness of Sin is way up here. Where are we? Wilderness here. Wilderness of Sin. Sin. This is what we're talking about. Wilderness of Sin. That's not where we're at. We're going to be down here. We call this the wilderness of Sinai, but the wilderness of Sin doesn't make any sense. Let me go back to my word here. I may have had, whoops. Oh, wilderness of Sin. Red Sea, encamped at the wilderness of Sin. Makes no sense. And they journeyed from the wilderness of Sin and camped at Dafka. Remember, I showed you where Dafka was on the other side of the old fake Mount Sinai on the Sinai Peninsula. And they parted Dafka and went to Alush. They moved from Alush and camped at Rephidim. Rephidim is where the rock of Horeb was at. The rock that Moses hit and the split in half and the water came out. It's also where we were attacked by the Amalekites. Remember, Moses held up his staff. He had, who do you have? He had Joshua on one side, and I forget who it was. Maybe it was the priest. Could it have been the priest, the high priest? Aaron? It might have been Aaron. It might have been Aaron on his other side, but we did well when we held the rod up, and we were losing when the rod came down. So we held it up until they were destroyed. That was Rephidim. And they departed of Rephidim and went to the wilderness of Sinai. This is where we were for a whole year. Remember, this is Exodus 19. This is where Yehovah told Israel's seed, don't go near a woman for 3 days prior to bringing Israel's seed to the mountain to hear Yehovah's words. Wasn't any ladies listening to Yehovah give his 10 commandments. Wasn't any Ger doing that. Wasn't any daughters doing that. These were Ezra men that heard the 10 commandments. When he said, thou shall keep the Sabbath, thou and thy sons and thy daughters and thy servants and thy flocks, animals, behemoth. Didn't say anything about ladies, did it? Just said thou. They was talking to the Ezra men. When we numbered Israel, we didn't number the ladies. We numbered the men of war, 20 years old and above, everyone who was able to go to war. So we were here for a year. The next verse, you don't know how much time has passed between coming to one place and leaving that place. We were in the wilderness of Sinai for that whole time. A lot of things happened in there. We had the 10 commandments. We had the golden calf. All those things. Remember, Yehovah brought back the commandments that Yehovah gave him on the stones, and he broke them. And he had to go back up for another 40 days, and Yehovah wrote them again on the stones. But this time, we had to provide the stone. We had followed the golden calf, created the golden calf. So it says, they departed from Hazarot. No, I should talk about these first. First we went to Kavrot HaTa'avah. This is what is this note? Oh, I know why I have this here. The last thing we did before we left the wilderness of Sinai, well, 2 things we did. We had Passover in our second year, first month, 14th day of the month. Then immediately we numbered Israel's seed for the second time. Remember the first time, we hadn't even numbered them. They just said when it came out, approximately 600,000 strong. Gebarim men. They saw that in verse 1. Now we're going to number Israel's seed again. Numbers 1 through 3 is this verse. But what are we numbering? Every male individually from 20 years old and above who is able to go to war. Now, this is exactly right after we kept the Passover. Within 2 weeks after we kept the Passover, then now we're going to number Israel's seed again. We're counting the Ezra men. So we left there and we went to Kivrot Hata'ava. It was there that Israel's seed, the Ger perhaps, that were with us also, complained against Moses. We need meat. We want meat. And he gave us meat. Remember, Yehovah gave us so much meat. It was waist high for acres and acres, perhaps miles. So much meat. And a number of people were killed at this time. Here, I think I have it here. So he called the name of the place Kivrot Hata'ava, because there they buried the people who yielded to cravings. From Kivrot Hata'ava, the people moved to Hazarot and camped at Hazarot. So now, here we are, we're moving from there, we're going to Hazarot. This is where Miriam and Aaron, Moses' siblings, complained against Moses for taking, it doesn't say ba'aling, it says taking lakak, a Cushite woman. They didn't think that was appropriate. But who are they to question what Moses is doing? She got leprosy as a result of her questioning her master, her Baal, her Lord, her Adonai, which she had no right to do. Now, Aaron also did it. It says Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman. But Aaron didn't get the same punishment that Miriam received. And in fact, Miriam was made a spectacle of, because we had already learned what happens when somebody gets leprosy, that they need to stay outside the camp for 7 days. And there's a process by which they come into the camp. Well, we were halted for 7 days while we waited for Miriam to come back into the camp so we could continue on our journey. Oh my. Do you think maybe that said and spoke something to the ladies who were there? Well, the next thing that we see is we camped at Rithmah. Now, Rithmah is not something that we hear much about. I did a research on it. First of all, here's Numbers 12. Afterwards, we moved from, that's not where we're on. It says, afterwards, we moved from Hazarot and camped in the wilderness of Paran. Yeah, that's what it says. We went from Hazarot to the wilderness of Zavan. It was here that we sent out the spies. They were gone for 40 days. Now, I had in my mind that it was Kadesh, where we were sending them out from. This was Kadesh Barnea. Here it is. In fact, I guess we're going to get to that. No, let's stay where we're at right now. Kadesh, here. This was Numbers 13:26. And they departed and came back to Moses and all the congregation of Israel's seed. This is the spies in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. So that's why I say I thought it was Kadesh. But when I looked for Kadesh today, where the spies went out from, where we were penalized, I say we, Israel's seed, was penalized and caused to stay in the wilderness for 40 years. This is where it happened. Yet they have Rithma. Why do they have Rithma? I remember seeing wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. And they brought back word to them and all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. So from here, the women or the Israel seed received word from Moses that we were not going to go into the promised land, that our sons were actually going to go into the promised land. And then they list a number of places. Hardly any of these do I know even where they're at. Let me show you where, at least here, we left the wilderness of Sinai. We came up here and ended up at Kadesh Barnea. Here it is right here, Kadesh. This is where the spies came from. Let me change maps here. No, actually, I want to do that in just a moment. Let's go here first, because we're going to see that we're going to drop down to Ezen-Geber. It's going to be the last place before we end up going back to Kadesh Barnea. Here it is. So this is 40 years. These places, we moved from Harada and camped at Makalot. Went from Makalot to Takat. They departed Takat and camped in Terah. We camped from Terah and went to Mitka. We went from Mitka and camped at, it goes on and on and on and on. But where we left off was Ezen-Geber. And Ezen-Geber is the top of the Dead Sea, where we were just looking. That's where we were at. From there, look what it says. They moved from Ezen-Geber and camped in the wilderness of Sin. There it says Zin, not Sin, which is Kadesh. So I'm going to switch maps now. Whoops, I guess I got to go here. Let's switch maps. Here's El Paran. I'm sorry, Ezen-Geber. They have it here. I think it's here. Regardless, it's in that location. Change my maps. We're going to open the main map and drop back down. And here we are at the top of the Red Sea. Let me do 75 again. It's easier. There we are. Ezen-Geber. I had it up here. So we're coming from here now, and we're going back up to the wilderness of Zin to Kadesh. Kadesh is where Miriam is going to die. And we went from one verse to another verse, or one chapter to another chapter, and hardly anybody realizes that 40 years had passed by from one chapter to the next. None of those other places that we visited, that we had on our itinerary in the chapter that we're going through today, was even in the scriptures. So here we are at Kadesh Barnea. We moved from Ezen-Geber and camped in the wilderness of Zin, which is Kadesh. Which is Kadesh? I would think Kadesh is in it. And they moved from Kadesh and camped at Mount Hor on the boundary of the land of Edom. Look what it says. What I have here? Nothing. Some of my notes are disappearing. I'm so distraught. My bad attitude shows when my notes disappear from my eSword. This is so precious to me, and it's just the new change in the computer, and yeah, it's not been good for me. I'm very distraught. Kadesh to Mount Hor. Here it is right here. Here's Mount Hor. Here's Kadesh. So we're moving to here. This is where it's called Seir, S-E-I-R, Seir, which is Edom, which is where Esau's seed are. We talked to Esau's seed about going through their land to get up to this area. Probably we would have come down the this highway. What do they call that highway? I think it's the desert highway. Yeah, desert road, I guess they call it. They didn't want us to do it. They wouldn't let us go through their land. So here we are at Mount Hor. This is where Aaron's going to die. He went up on Mount Hor, and Yehovah took him. And his son took his place as the high priest, Eleazar. When Miriam died at Kadesh, yeah, that's the note that I had there. Kadesh. After 40 years in the wilderness, this is where we return to. My note disappeared. It drives me crazy. That was in the first month, 40th year. This is in the 40th year, first day of the 5th month, that Aaron, at 123 years old, is going to die on Mount Hor. Then we had a situation with the king of Arad. The king of Arad, the Canaanite who dwelt in the south of the land of Canaan, heard of the coming of Israel's seed. He's going to come against us, and we're freaking out. We finally did fight him, and we beat him, but we weren't going to go into the promised land at that time. Let me show you where he's at, king of Arad. It's all in this area. Here it is up here. Here's Arad, king of Arad. When we were coming down, sent the spies. They probably went right up this path, passed even through his kingdom. Remember, Arad, there's probably many cities that are involved in this kingdom, but he's coming against us down here. Where do we go next? Here it is. The king of Arad, the Canaanites, who dwelt in the south of the land of Canaan, heard of the coming of Israel's seed. And they departed from Mount Hor and went to Zelmaot. And they parted Zelmanah and camped at Punan. And they departed Punan and camped at Obat. Now remember this town, Obat. They departed Obat and camped at Le Avarim in the border of Moab. Here's where we're going. We couldn't go through their land. So I believe that this is what we did. We went from Avot and we came down here and took this path right here up to Le Avarim. From there, I think we went to the desert road, and you'll see where we go next. Had to take a roundabout way. We're coming into the promised land kind of through the back door, taking out the Moabites. No, not the Moabites. We're taking out Amorites. two kings of the Amorites and taking all of their land. Remember, we saw last week that became Gad's land and Reuben's land. Of course, the king that we took it from, what was his name? I'm drawing a blank on what his name is right now. But he took it from Moab, and we took it from him. Let's go back. They departed. Okay, they have Leabarim. They departed, whatever this is, and camped at Dibon Gad. Dibon Gad. It's called Dibon Gad because Gad is the one who's going to have this land. From Dibon Gad, we went to Alman Diplatayim. Diplatayim. That's what it is. Diplatayim. Let me show you where that's at. Remember, this is the way we're conquering this portion. Here is Dibon. Oh, maybe they went right here and right through to Dibon. Then Diplatayim. It says the house of Diplatayim. I think Ketamot is going to be involved in that too. Let's take a look. Here we are, Diplatayim. They moved from Diplatayim and camped in the mountains of Avarim before Nebo. They departed from the mountains of Avarim and camped in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho, and camped by the Jordan at Beth Yeshimot as far as Abel, I want to say Kasim, Abel Hashatim, Abel Hashatim. Why they call it the Acacia Grove makes no sense at all. Let's go to the map. Here is, we left off of here, Diplatayim. We went to Nebo. There's Nebo. Now keep in mind, while we're here and here, our armies have cleaned out all of the Amorites that go all the way up into Bashan. We took out the king of Bashan, and we took out the king who was in Moab at the time. And we ended up at Beth Yeshimot. Here, let me go a little bit closer here. 100. Here's Beth Yeshimot and Abel Shittim. So we're in this valley. They called it the plain of Moab before Jericho. Here's Jericho. I put at last count, after 40 years in the wilderness, we had 601,730 Ezra men. I'm calling them Ezra men. They're Israel's seed. Israel's seed, 100,000. It's a number Israel's seed. That's the Ezra men. 601,730. Now, new topic. Those were the journeys. Now, Yehovah spoke to Moses in the plain of Moab by the Jordan, across from Jericho. This is where we just saw that. Speak to who? Israel's seed. It's always Israel's seed that Yehovah speak, or that Moses is speaking to, or that Yehovah is speaking to through Moses. And say to them, when you have crossed the Jordan into Canaan's land, then you shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you. Now, he's not saying kill all the inhabitants of the land that are before you. He's saying drive them out. Are some of them going to die? Oh, yeah, you bet a lot of them are going to die. You shall drive them out. You shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land before you. Destroy all their engraved stones. Destroy all their molded images. Remember, you shall have no other idols before me. Demolish all their high places. High places. What would be a high place? I think it's kind of what we would call churches right now. Some of them are in the woods. But these are high places where we worship their Elohims, where they worship their Elohims. Here, I think I can this up. It says, this is Exodus 34. He says, take heed to yourself, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land where you're going, lest it be a snare in your midst. But you shall destroy their altars, break down their sacred pillars. When we're talking about engraved stones, I think that's what we're talking about. The phallic symbols, kind of like the Washington Monument, the thing that's out in front of the city of London, and also in Rome, right in the square. They got that carved stone. What do they call it here? Sacred pillars. Sacred pillars, verse 13. Cut down their wooden images. For you shall worship no other Elohim, for Yehovah, whose name is jealous, is a jealous Elohim. Yehovah doesn't want us worshiping the modern day golden calf, folks. We've learned lies. That modern day given golden calf was given to us by the Catholic Church. And wait until you see what has been going on in the Catholic Church. They are not our friends. They have turned us so that we cannot even understand who Yehovah is. They've covered up his name with the Lord. Every place in the scriptures. They've given us another Elohim and said, here's your Elohim, worship him. Oh, I know. We have the doctrines and traditions of men. I'll tell you, when I kept Passover for the first time, folks, I did it kicking and screaming because I thought Jesus was the Passover lamb. But I was wrong. I had learned lies, worthless and unprofitable things. And this was a big one. And it wasn't until I kept Passover the way it was supposed to be kept, by faith, doing what Yehovah said, that Yehovah showed me about the Ger and the Ezra, about the Ben Nakar and the Toshav. They know Israel, but they're not Israel. The Ger has joined himself to Israel, but he's not Israel. He's not an Ezra man until he comes into covenant with Yehovah as his firstborn son. Then he becomes Israel. He's a jealous Elohim, verse 15. Lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land and play the harlot with their Elohim, their lawmakers and judges, and sacrifice to their Elohim. And one of them invites you to eat of his sacrifice. Isn't this what they did? Moab did to us on the plain of Moab. This is why we took out Midian. Was it Easter dinner? Was it Christmas brunch? And you take of his daughters for your sons, and his daughters play the harlot with their Elohim, and make your son play the harlot with their Elohim. You shall make no molded Elohim for yourselves. No, we're going to tear down all these false idols, phallic symbols, pillars, wooden images. He goes on, 53. You shall dispossess the inhabitants of the land and dwell in it, for I have given you the land to possess. Who's he talking to? Look what it says right here, Israel's seed. Speak to Israel's seed, the Ezra men. This is the seed and the land. There it is. We're getting the land today. We're getting ready to take it. We've already got some of it. But what's he saying? Look, I put all the land is his here. This is David. Psalms 24. The earth is Yehovah's and all its fullness, the world and those who dwell in it. He gives the land to his heir, to his son Israel. It's about the land and the seed. Now he says he's going to divide the land, and you shall divide the land by lot as an inheritance among your families. To the larger you shall give a larger inheritance, and to the smaller you shall give a smaller inheritance. There everyone's inheritance shall be whatsoever falls to him by lot. So once we give it to the tribes, then they're going to take the heads of the tribes and they're going to dole it out by lot. You shall inherit according to the tribes of your fathers. And we saw that also in Numbers 26, where they were telling us we were going to do it by lot, and we're going to divide it up with the big tribes and the smaller tribes. Last verse. Moreover, it shall be that I will do to you as I thought to do to them. What's he saying? I think this is what he's saying. It sounds like the inhabitants have to die or be driven out, or we will. That's really what it's coming down to. It's our land. It's going to be our land now, but we got to take it. Be strong and very courageous. This is what he told Joshua. Joshua is going to lead us. Well, next week, we're going to talk about the size of this land. Here it is right here. The boundaries of the land for the 9.5 tribes. These are the boundaries. So we're going to look at that next week. You guys, thank you for joining me today. I hope that you get broader understandings. You know, this is my goal. There are things that we have not seen before. I mean, who Israel's seed is a huge one. Calling them the children of Israel and letting a woman think she's part of Israel's seed is ridiculous. He says, number the men, all who are able to go to war. Ladies, don't go to war. A lady in her menses is going to get us killed because Yehovah can't dwell in our camp if a woman is in her menses in our camp. It doesn't work. We don't know the role of a woman and the role of a man. They're not the same. They have different duties and responsibilities before Yehovah. Well, again, these are only things that you're going to see if you stay with me. I mean, if you starting Genesis 1, look what we saw in Genesis 1. You know, really, we're talking about the land. Here we are, the land that's going to be distributed. We're not going to see that, what land they're going to get, until, that's 54, until we're in Joshua. And after we do Deuteronomy, we're going to go through Joshua as well. I think you're going to find it interesting. And I had to go through Joshua because Yashua goes through Joshua. And there's a lot more for us to see. if we take the time to look at Yahshua at the same time. All right, well, I'll let you go. Thank you for joining me. Please hit the like button or the affirmation button, whatever it is, on Rumble or Telegram or YouTube, and share this with your friends. I can help you. You know what? Lay down some of your preconceived ideas and listen to what I have to say. I can help you. But if you don't listen, you're going to get the same thing. You're going to stay in the same lies that you've been taught. Christianity is not a friend. We got to move beyond that. I can help you. All right. Well, we'll see you next time. Catch you later now.
Well, for a chapter with just lots of